This is such a strong point for me. I think there's so many people out there who see something or hear something and they get upset about it, and that's all they sit with. They just get upset and then they let it go away eventually. But being able to see something that upsets you and something that just drives you absolutely crazy, do something.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. Kate Bryan here for another week with another inspiring story. The One Girl Revolution podcast highlights the stories of everyday women who are changing the world through their lives. Please subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. We're on YouTube at One Girl Revolution, and you can find all of our social media links, podcast episodes, videos, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com. Today, we talk about those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for us and our well-being, and the importance of humanizing people, their families, and their stories. Police officers have been a politicized population over the past few years, but what about their families? And what about those that fallen police officers leave behind? In this episode, we share some of those stories. Today's guest on the One Girl Revolution podcast is Megan O'Grady. Megan is the founder of Blue Line Bears, an organization that makes teddy bears out of the uniforms of fallen police officers and delivers them to their loved ones. I read about Megan's story a year or so ago and was so touched by the simplicity, but also, as you hear in this episode, the complexity of making a teddy bear for the loved ones of those who were left behind. Megan has delivered over 1,000 teddy bears to date, and nothing is slowing her down. Megan joins the One Girl Revolution podcast to share her own story as the child of a police officer. She talks about what made her decide to start Blue Line Bears. She shares heart-wrenching stories of the families that they've delivered bears to, and so much more. You don't want to miss this powerful episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast. So without further ado, here's Megan. Megan, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like this interview has been a long time coming because I read your story a couple of years ago, and I just have been following everything that you're doing, and I'm just so touched by your work and your life, and I'm so excited to share it with all of our listeners. But before we get into Blue Line Bears and your own life and your own story, I'd love to ask you, who is a One Girl Revolution in your life? Who is a woman or girl that's touched your life in a special way?
I think someone that is really important in my life that has genuinely just changed it for the better is my grandma. She was the one who really stepped up when I even came up with the idea of Blue Line Bears, because I didn't know how to sew or how to do literally anything I needed to do. And she stepped up and just really found a way for me to be able to do everything that I wanted to do. And she's still here today helping me with literally everything that comes across our path that she can help me with. And so definitely her.
I love stories like that where grandmothers, it's like the intergenerational thing, you know, where it's like our grandmothers pass on traditions to us, and then we can pass them on to our children and our children's children. So that's really beautiful. I want to rewind. I like to tell the stories, the evolution story of every woman or girl that's on this podcast. So I'd love to rewind to your early life. So who you are, where you're from, and I'd love to just hear a little bit about your life growing up.
So I am 19 now, and I live in Orlando, Florida now, going to UCF. But before that, I lived in Cape Coral, Florida, and I started Blue Line Bears when I was 14.
That's awesome. I'm jealous that you live in Orlando because, like, Walt Disney, do you get to go to all that stuff? Even I know you're in college and you're doing all the important things.
I go to Universal a lot.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. What are you studying in college?
So I'm double majoring in psychology and art history.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so cool. Wow. Well, I want to talk about Blue Line Bears and everything that you're doing with that. I'm so curious, when did the spark happen? Like, was there a story or something that happened that made you think, I need to start Blue Line Bears?
Absolutely. So after the attack on Dallas in 2016, where 5 officers were killed, that was really the moment that it hit me that my dad, who's a police officer, and even though he was a police officer in Florida and Cape Coral, which is like small and it's not likely that anything huge is going to happen there, but regardless, after the attack on Dallas where the 5 officers were killed, it just really pushed me to do something for the families because that's my biggest fear, losing my dad. So after a little bit, I decided to make the teddy bears because I wanted something that kids could have that they could hold on to that wasn't just going to be put on a shelf. And then I wanted them to be like extremely like special to them. So I made them out of the uniform shirts.
Wow, that's amazing. So for people that are listening, talk about the teddy bears and what Blue Line Bears does.
Yes. So what we do is we take the uniform shirts of fallen officers and we make them into teddy bears for the kids. So each bear has the officer's end of watch date, which is the day that they passed. They have blue line bears on one of the feet, on one of the paws. It has the name of who it's going to. There's a St. Michael medal. And then I think my personal favorite part is that on the chest, there's a shield that we embroider that has the name and number of the officer. So altogether, it's just a very personalized piece. And there's no doubting that it was made especially for each family.
That's really beautiful. Megan, what was it like growing up with a dad who was a police officer? I'm just always curious what that experience was like.
It's definitely interesting. My dad was always a field training officer until I was probably about, I think it stopped when I was a freshman in high school. So what that meant is that like any given night, he could come home for dinner and there would just be another police officer in our house. And we would just be filled with police officers all the time. There would always be different ones cycling in and out. And a lot of them just became like family to me. Like I know a lot of them now, and they just will always and forever be part of my family. Um, it also meant that like I always had a family there for me if something did happen to my dad.
Mm.
And I always knew that in my heart because the police department that my dad is with just does such an amazing job taking care of their officers. And they really do view it like a family. So it is really inspiring growing up around a police officer like that, where you know that like it's just such a tight knit group and they're doing their job. They aren't bad people. They're just there to do their job, support their family, and meet friends along the way.
I think your experience growing up in a family with a father who was a police officer and surrounding yourself with police officers is really important because there obviously is a lot of discussion in the world today about the police and, people have a lot of opinions. And I think it's so important for us to remember the human beings and then also their family. So behind the badge, there's a human being. Not saying that everybody is perfect, but I think it's important for us to remember that these are humans and then they have families, they have kids just like you and so many of the other police officers that your dad works with, they have families and kids. And I'm sure growing up, there were moments where it was scary for you. I'm sure that there were moments where you were like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Oh my gosh, and we all have different moments like that in our life where maybe you're in a situation that you're scared and you're like, what's going to happen? Or you have a parent that gets injured in a car accident or something. So we all have those moments. But for you, I think it's important for people to hear your story, your personal experience. And that really is what led you to starting Blue Line Bears. So it's really beautiful. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your service, because I feel like the families also are serving too, because you make a lot of sacrifices, which is important for us to recognize.
Thank you.
So how to date with Blue Line Bears, how many bears have you guys placed, or do you know?
So right now we have delivered over 960, and then with the ones that are in the shop currently being made, we are at 987.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so special. And that's going to be so special for all of these families to have something to hold on to. It's so heartbreaking that you have to make these bears on the one hand, but it's so important for us to recognize the service that these men and women have given.
Absolutely.
Megan, I would love to know a couple of stories. Are there a couple of stories of families that you have made a bear for that maybe touched your heart in a special way, or something happened that you didn't really expect?
Absolutely. The families are all so amazing. I wish I could meet all of them in person, but with the way that school and even keeping up with Blue Line Bears it's not possible. Um, the ones that I have met, each one is just so unique and special. Um, so there are a couple that really, really stick out for me. Um, one of them being one of the very first families that I delivered bears to, um, was in Polk County, Florida. And he passed away actually in front of his two twin daughters. They watched the whole thing happen. Um, they were probably, I think, 5 or 6 when it happened too. So it was very traumatizing for the girls.
Mm-hmm.
And they would not sleep without their mom. They always just stayed with her. They were very protective of her because they didn't want anything to happen to her. And she said that once we gave the bears to the two daughters, they were both able to just sleep in their own bed again because they were holding a piece of their dad. There's one mom in Louisville that will send pictures of her son with his daddy bear, and it's adorable. He'll be holding it and cuddling it, and then he'll be like, high five, daddy, and give the bear a high five and all this stuff. So those two especially stick out to me. And then I think one that's like one of the most tear-jerking ones is there was family, and I made bears for an officer's parents. And I ran into them a couple months later by accident, and they were like, thank you so much for the bears, because the night that I got my bear, I finally was able to see my little boy in my dreams, and he told me that everything is okay, and it just left me with such a sense of peace. So the families do a really good job of making me cry. They are all so amazing and incredible, and they all have such a special place in my heart, but those three definitely are like tear jerkers for me thinking about it. But yeah.
It's such a simple gesture, but the power that can have. And I know it's not simple to make the bears on the one hand,
Yes.
but it is such a simple gesture, and it just can have such powerful impact on these families and on these individuals. And like you said, I mean, the parents of these police officers, when their lives get lost too, there are so many generations of people that, love them and miss them, and we need to continue their legacy on. And it's almost like these bears are giving people the permission to carry on their legacy and talk about, their moms and dads to the little kids, or, to tell the stories of these amazing heroes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, how do you get connected to the people that you end up making bears, or how do you find out about them?
So we find out about them through an app called ODMP. It's short for the Officer Down Memorial Page. They basically are another nonprofit, and they make their job to update everyone with current and extremely far, like in the past, officers who have passed away in the line of duty. So they update us immediately as soon as they know that an officer was killed in the line of duty. We use that to keep up with everything. A lot of times, the friends and family will reach out to us and ask us for bears. And then if they don't, we try to reach out to the department.
That's amazing. Well, what you're doing is just so powerful, and I know that it's touching so many lives. On the flip side, Megan, I want to ask you about, I know that you've gotten some hassle from people. I think I read a story somewhere that you had wrapped your car about blue line bears and people were, attacking you or different. Can you talk a little bit about that? And the reason that I ask you is because there are so many people out there who are doing something that we see as good. And a lot of times, especially young people or, even women in situations and men too, people can attack them. And so I would just love for whatever you feel comfortable sharing, I would love for you to share a little bit about that experience, just the hassle you've gotten from people.
Absolutely. So, when I first got the Jeep, which was in April, a couple years ago, we decided to wrap it, and it was this really awesome wrap. It had blue line bears, it had a thin blue line flag. It was by far the coolest wrap I've ever seen. And after the thing with George Floyd, I was like absolutely terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, if I'm driving this car, something is going to happen to me. I don't know what I'm going to do. And one day I was driving and I came up to a red light, and the person behind me came up and started like banging on my window and just screaming at me. And I was like, oh my God. And so I like pulled out into incoming traffic, and nothing happened, luckily. But just the thought of having to drive into incoming traffic so that someone doesn't hurt you is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple days after that, all made the executive decision to take the wrap off.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember if you or somebody had emailed me about that. And when you shared that story or when I had seen about that had happened, my heart just broke for you. Because again, it goes back to this human dignity. You're a human being and people need to take a second and think about what they're doing before they start acting, because you're a young person, you're a young woman out on the road by yourself. I know myself when I'm traveling by myself, I just get really nervous because I don't know, I'm a single person, even going out and about, even going to the grocery store and stuff, like things happen and you need to take care of yourself. But that's just so scary. It must have been so scary that you experienced that. And I'm sorry that you experienced it, but I wanted to ask you, because again, I think there are things that happen in all of our lives where we might get hassled for something or someone might scare us, but we need to continue doing the work. You need to continue doing the work that you're doing because it's touching so many lives. And I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Megan, I shared a little bit about why I think your work is so important, but why do you think Blue Line Bears is so important?
I think after doing it for so long, something that I've really learned is that it's important because of two main things. One being that the families feel like they're holding a piece of the officer again, because it's not just a shirt anymore. It is something that they can hold and take with them on trips and sleep next to and give like cuddly hugs to. So it provides a sense of like, this is my officer again in my hands. And then two, it shows that like these families just need someone to show that they care. A lot of people have such a negative outlook on police officers, and so having someone out there is just, they need that. They need to know that there are people in the public who are there for them and who do love them and want to help remember their spouse or parent or child or whatever it is. But like, that's the most important part.
Yeah, it's so important what you're doing. And I think often we all are in a situation when you lose somebody,
people remember them right off the bat. And like you said, you know, there are police officers that would be there for you, for the families. I know that most of these police officers come from a community of police officers that support the family, but public facing, a lot of times people just forget about those who have been lost. And so this is a way to continue to remind the family and remind other people. I'm sure when people walk into their houses and see the bear, all these stories pop up where they're like, oh, let me tell you this story about Joe and what he did here and blah, 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 blah. And like, I think that it's so
Absolutely.
important to continue that, which is what you're doing. If you could get to the root, Megan, of like the very root, I'm always curious what the driving force is. And I'm sure in your story, partially your own experience as the daughter of a police officer, but, you know, definitely plays a role in it. But if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do, why you continue to do Blue Line Bears, I'm sure it's a lot to balance with college and everything else going on. But if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do, what is that? Why do you do it?
I genuinely think that the very root of why I do what I do is a combination of fear because it's something that I'm so afraid of. And it's a combination of just pure sadness because part of the conversation that I had with my dad before I started any of this is I was like talking to him and I told him I want to do something for the families. I definitely want to step up and do something for the families. And he's like, well, everyone does something for the families and then forgets them. And that just made me so sad. Like, they should never be forgotten. It should never be something like you said, where it's like we remember them for the first 10 days that it happened. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, the world keeps spinning, everyone move on. That's not what it should be. They gave their life protecting you, and you're just going to forget them. So I think it's a combination of just like for and sadness for that fact.
Yeah, I just feel so strongly that we all need to remind ourselves, and I'm trying to do it more than ever, remind myself that even after a funeral, after someone has passed away, that there still is always going to be a hole in that family. You know, there's always going to be needs, and we need to remember people and reach out to them. And especially, you know, around anniversaries of when people have passed away, reaching out to the family and just letting them know that they're loved and that we care about them. And death is obviously a part of all of our lives. And, but we need to remember those who we've lost, and especially those who have sacrificed everything for us and for our safety. And so, Megan, you're amazing. I'm so grateful for you and everything that you're doing. Where does Blue Line Bears go from here? I'm so curious to see where it goes, and I'm sure you can't really predict the future. We don't really know where Blue Line Bears will be 5 or 10 years down the line, but in your dream of dream worlds, where do you hope that Blue Line Bears goes from here, and what do you hope to accomplish?
I think one of my favorite things about Blue Line Bears is that I started it so young with expectations that I would be doing such a small thing and making maybe like 30 bears a year. And then I just have watched it grow so fast. So I think one of my favorite things is that it's so unpredictable. So it's not really easy to predict what's going to happen next because I'm probably going to be completely wrong. However, what I'm really, really excited for is we are hitting that huge milestone of 1,000 bears. We
Incredible.
are super close. We have 13 more bears, and then we are right there. I'm not really sure what we're going to do for that yet. We've been talking about it. We have a couple of ideas, but it's going to be something that is a little bit bigger because that is such a huge milestone for us. We're also reaching the 5-year point in January, so that's super exciting too. But what I really want to accomplish is just, again, like reaching out to so many families. Like that is my goal here, is to bears for as many families as we can. Um, I think a huge milestone that I would like to reach is trying to make bears for every family in one entire year. I think that would be absolutely amazing. And of course, it's up to the families, but just being able to make one for an entire year would be so special. Um, but yeah, I mean, other than that, there's really not much I can predict or hope for because you never know what's going to be thrown at you with this.
Right. What about for you? What's next for you? I know you're in college. What are you thinking after college? Do you have any big hopes and dreams there?
Yes. So after I get my bachelor's degree in art therapy and psychology, I will be getting my master's degree in art therapy. So I want to be an art therapist, and I think I want to direct a lot of my services towards children, especially those who are going through the grieving process of losing someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone in the line of duty, but just losing someone in general. I think that's a group that could really use it. So
That's so beautiful. You are so profound and you're so wise. And I can't wait to see
thank
where
you.
you go from here. And I can't wait to see Blue Line Bears continue to grow. And I will be following, and One Girl will be supporting in any way that we can and promoting everything that you're doing. I can't wait to see when you get to 1,000 bears. It's going to be amazing. And then the 5-year anniversary is a big thing as well. But how can people, Megan, how can people get involved in what you're doing and how can they support you? I'm sure there are a bunch of different ways.
Yes. So people can get involved by just simply following. Our biggest thing is having someone to reach out to us when an officer passes away. That's the biggest thing, is we need someone to reach out to us, someone to put us in contact with the family. And then even if you don't have a contact with a family at all, just being supportive is an amazing thing. Support is one of those things that I think a lot of people forget to mention. Um, it's super important. It keeps us going, because without you guys supporting us, we really just could not move forward in any sense of the word. Like I couldn't move forward. Um, so just supporting is the biggest thing. And then people can do that through following us on Facebook or Instagram. Those are our two biggest ones that we post on. And then, of course, just visiting the website and learning more about us.
I think it's important too that you mentioned support, because people, even in their own communities, if you know a fallen police officer, do something for the family and don't just do it once. Stay in touch with them, figure out what they need. There's a lot going on in those scenarios. Loss is always tragic, but in a situation like that, these families need our support. So if you know somebody in your own community, get involved and help them.
Absolutely.
Support them. That's awesome. Well, Megan, I am so excited to have you on and to share this story. I will be sure to post all of the links so people can follow you on social media. They can donate. They can reach out to you. And yeah, I can't wait to see where you go from here. I have 2 final questions that I want to ask you. One is kind of just a random personal question, but I'm curious, what's the best advice you've ever gotten? Do you have like a motto or advice that you've gotten from someone that just kind of keeps you going on a day-to-day basis?
I think the best advice that I've ever gotten is, it's super simple, and it's just to like look for the positive. And I know it's like super cliche and everything, but I think working in such a high emotionally demanding job, like what I'm doing, is it can be very emotionally demanding. Um, it's good to always look for something positive, because if you don't look for something positive, it will absolutely eat you. And it has happened to me a couple of times where I have debated stopping just because it has become too much emotionally for me. And just being able to I guess like take myself out of it and recover and then go back is a really important thing. But getting through that involves looking at the positives. So
Yeah, that's an important motto or an important thing
yeah,
for all of us to remember, because life does feel so dark, especially over the past couple of years. I feel like we've all gone through so much with
absolutely.
COVID and everything else going on in our world, and we're still going through so much. And it's important to remember that we can choose joy, we can choose to be positive. Sometimes we might not want to be. I know sometimes I would just want to sit in my dark cloud and,
Yes,
sulk by myself. Or it's a lot to process too, what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. You're hearing these stories, your heart is breaking for these families, the personal connection with your own dad and all the police officers that you know. I'm sure that can be traumatic some days, because you're thinking about your own dad and your own community of police officers. And so when one is lost, it really can negatively affect you. But that's important for us to remember, that we can always choose joy. And when you're serving other people, I've always found when you're doing good for other people, that can help turn your day around or your life around.
absolutely.
Megan, before I let you go, I have this last question that I always ask other women who are on this podcast, obviously, because we're focused on women, other people listen to it, but mostly it's for women and girls. So I want to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
I would leave the message that if you see something that you think you can help or make an impact on, just do it. Like, I think there are so many people. This is such a strong point for me. I think there's so many people out there who see something or hear something and they get upset about it. And that's all they sit with. They just get upset and then they let it go away eventually. But being able to see something that upsets you and something that just drives you absolutely crazy, do something. It's it is not easy to do something always, but it's so fulfilling. It is absolutely so fulfilling. So
And
that is
channel.
like my biggest thing.
Yeah, and channel, like it's so good, but I'm reflecting on even the experience that you had in your car. And like if people are upset about something, be the change that you want to see on the
Absolutely.
good side and the bad side, whatever your thing is. I believe I agree with you. We all have something that we need, an impact that we can make on this world. And a lot of times it's many impacts that we can make throughout our lives. But I am just so glad that you shared that, because I hope that every person who's listening, that they find out what that is. They find that spark and they chase it.
Absolutely.
And you're a great example. You don't have to have a ton of
Thank you.
money. You don't even have to know how to sew when you start.
No,
Blue Line
you do
Bears,
not.
just find your grandmother and have her help you. Well, Megan, I'm just so grateful for all the great work that you do. Thank you so much. I will stay in touch with you and keep tabs on everything that you have going on. But thank you again for joining the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the great work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com.